There we go. So, Jeff Holman, if you don't mind just giving some background on yourself, introducing yourself, we're excited to have you here at Midday Connect. And we're excited to have some of our sponsors here, Chad from CMO Zen, Michael Filato from Full Throttle. I can't see everybody now again. So if there are others, throw it in the chat, but thanks. And Jeff, please introduce yourself, take it away, and we'll do 15 minutes of presentation and 15 minutes of Q&A.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much for having me over, Taylor. I think last time I spoke, it was about IP strategy. There's a little different conversation today. And I think this might be the first time my wife has joined to a presentation. Brooke is on here, so be sure to say hi to her. She's our COO for the law firm. We run a law firm that is a little bit different from other law firms. Our law firm acts basically as a full service legal team for startups and scaling businesses, but we do it on a fractional basis. So when you mentioned earlier that I'm the general counsel for PillowCube, yes, I am. More importantly, my team is the legal team for PillowCube. And so they have access to, trademarks and patents and contracts and equity fundraising and the other legal stuff that they need, all on a fractional basis. So as a career intro, that's really what I do. I got my background is in engineering. I did electrical engineering at the University of Utah and my law degree at the University of Utah. And then I went later on in my career and did an MBA at BYU. So if you have to push me for one or the other, I'm 2 for 1, 2 against 1 for the University of Utah right now. But in the chat, I said I'll be there for a tiebreaker if needed. Anyway, we'll have some time for questions. So if there's more about the background that you need to know, just let me know. I don't think I'll be watching the chat while we're talking because as any good attorney, I have loaded this up with way more than 12 to 15 minutes of information. So I'm going to get going on it, but do feel free to interrupt if you want. And if Taylor and Hannah say it's okay to interrupt. But so here are the goals that we said we were going to do. Hannah shared this earlier. We're going to identify typical areas where companies are usually create avoidable legal issues. We're going to talk about creating standard legal forms that are tailored to your business. And then we're going to talk about effectively training your people. There's really, well, before I get into the solution for this, the reason I do this is because I just love the chaos of startups and scaling businesses. I don't know why. I've worked with Apple, I've worked with IBM, I've worked with Intel, and there's just something about working with small companies where things are moving fast, they get built fast, they break fast, and there's just chaos around it. That chaos leads to a lot of headaches. Some of those are easy to resolve. Some of those are really easy to avoid if you have the time to think ahead and actually put things into action so that you can avoid those legal issues. And other times you just can't and you have to resolve them. So there's just some magic about small and scaling businesses that I'm drawn to for whatever reason. So with that said, my goal is always to work with really cool companies, really cool teams, really cool technologies. And the better that they do, obviously, the better that I do, because I like having successful clients who are doing cool things. Part of that then becomes, how do I help them solve their problems faster? How do I help them avoid the problems or minimize the problems that are likely to come up? So this is where we've put together a handful of playbooks. Let me see legal playbooks that we use with our clients. Playbooks are not new. This isn't like magic, but in the legal world, a lot of people aren't using any type of playbook. They're not putting into practice the same things that they do in every other area of the business. And maybe that's because it's just legal and you're like, you hate hiring attorneys, you hate talking to attorneys, you hate paying attorneys, and you don't even want to think about the stuff that they do, and so you avoid doing any of it yourself to avoid having to hire them and talk to them and pay them as much as if you took care of it. But legal playbooks really are the answer to a lot of the typical headaches in startups and small businesses. They give you, consistency of action so that your team is operating all kind of in unison. They give you speed and decision making, which is super critical for smaller businesses to be able to move fast. That's one of your main advantages over larger businesses. And if you don't have that advantage, you've just missed out on a huge piece of why your company can reach a level of success faster than maybe a larger company who's going to compete against you. And then, of course, consistency and speed, and those give you scalability, which is what you're really looking for, right? All of my clients are trying to find or have found that that minimum viable product that leads to some type of an ideal customer profile who's buying consistently from you, so that you can then scale that business model and the revenue, of course. So let's talk a little bit about the areas. I don't think any of this is going to come as a surprise, but these are the areas where you're going to find that legal playbooks come into play in your business. And the fun part about this is, while there's kind of a framework, every business is different, right? Some businesses, I talked to a friend of mine who said, I'm going to start X number of businesses over the next 2 years that have no employees whatsoever. I'm going to do it with AI. I'm excited to see how far he gets with that. He might not have a whole lot of employment and HR issues though, right? He's probably going to have a lot more cybersecurity and data privacy issues with the businesses that he's building. Some companies, they're built on IP. That's got a soft spot in my heart for intellectual property. It's where I've spent a lot of my time in my past. E-commerce companies are going to be in product liability a lot more. Some companies are building one company and scaling one company, while other companies are building multiple companies, and they're having to form a lot of companies and govern a lot of companies. Some people are bringing outside investors. These are not unusual situations, any of them. These are the areas where you're going to find that you really should have some standardization in place. And we'll go through one example. I'm going to do the intellectual property because, again, I like that one. But this is where you can pretty much create a playbook and maybe follow the framework that I'll show you here for the types of things that you want to put in your playbook if you're going to build it yourself. So in our intellectual property playbook, for example, and I've divided this out into some gold and some brown. The gold stuff is really the areas where you're probably going to want to create some content, create some instructions, and fill this in so that you have a tool for your team. The brown down below, there's some standard forms and documents. As you grow, as you perhaps get documents from attorneys and create what you need as far as your own templates go, you should be putting those into some type of repository so that you can reuse those and have those available to you. I can't tell you how many times someone's called me and said, "Hey, can I get a copy of that NDA?" And while on our model we don't charge a lot, if at all, to share those copies, I know a lot of attorneys, every time you ask them for a copy of the same NDA, they're going to charge you 15 or 30 minutes of time just to send you that file. So you're going to want to keep these and standardize them as much as you can. So let's go through some of these. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to do all of them, but these probably are not, again, not surprising things, but use this as a framework for building your own legal playbook. If you get a copy of ours at some point, you'll see, hey, we've got all this stuff in this playbook, and other areas of law would have similar types of things. We're going to have an overview in every playbook. We're going to have kind of something to explain the importance of that area of law to your business. We're going to have typical forms and documents, a few of those. We're going to talk about who's responsible for different areas of different types of things in that area of law. We're going to talk about what types of functions within the business typically see issues in that area of law. And that's really important, I think, because those functions are kind of disconnected a lot of times from the actual roles in the business. Somebody helping out with website design, you might have 5 different people working on website design, but you've only got one person, maybe your CMO or whoever, that's really in charge of launching and maintaining the website. All 5 of those people, because of the functions they're working on, need to know about some of these IP issues, not just that one CMO. KPIs, objectives, if you can find a way to get those into a legal setting, you're just creating a more powerful legal tool for yourselves, because most of the time those don't make it. They're very far from that. We think of those as like business tools, but legal should just be another business tool in your business toolbox. So let's go through some of these real quick. And just somehow, okay. So for our legal playbook for intellectual property, we got common types of IP. This is not surprising. You got patents, trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets. I also like to talk about contracts, because contracts are the tool that we use to basically manage all of these assets that we go and get. If your team already knows about this is super simple. They don't need to spend a lot of time training this, right? They just need to know that that's there. When you get a new person that comes in, they read the playbook, they look at the overview of IP, they talk about the common types of IP. That might be all the training they need on that part of it. Typical objectives for IP assets. And again, these are just some examples that I've pulled from our own playbook. You might be looking to protect your core inventions as like one of your primary objectives with IP. Or you might be a type of company who has a business model that knows how to monetize your IP. And so you're gonna look and see, how do we meet that objective? Maybe you're minimizing IP risk, your exposure to other people who have IP, competitors who might come after you or stop you or obstruct you from building your business. Maybe that's one of your objectives. The playbook, the way that we've designed our playbook is we have it kind of generally set up so that when we give it to a client, they can see and read through all these different objectives and some of the details that go along with them. And then they can decide for themselves, well, what really are our objectives with our IP? And it's probably going to be some of the stuff that we've listed, but maybe for certain companies, they're going to have objectives that are outside of what we typically see. So team roles and responsibilities. So here's where I've listed off a few of the examples. You don't see all of them, but you see the kind of the typical ones in a business. So your CEO is probably in charge of the IP strategy of the business. Your CFO is probably in charge of the budgeting. Again, no surprise here, but they're going to see these types of responsibilities, and this gets put into an authority decision-making matrix that you'll see in just a minute, which is maybe a little easier to digest. So, but we like to break this out and say, hey, in our company or your company, which roles do you have? If you don't have a CFO yet, then your CFO is not going to be responsible for anything. Maybe it falls on the CEO. Maybe it falls on a co-founder or whoever that might be. Maybe you don't have a CTO. Maybe you've got a product developer, and so your product guy is the guy who's responsible. Your product guy might be an outsourced product guy, and you want them to be responsible, on a fractional basis even. So these really need to be tailored to your business, but the playbook gives you a pretty clear overview of all the things that you should be thinking about. So this is where the functions are different from the roles that should be accountable, right? So I put a couple of examples up here. Your business partnerships and collaborations. If your business is dealing with these types of things, you might be good to be aware of joint development projects that you're going into some JV agreement with another company, and you need to know that that's probably going to come up, right? Every company out there that I've ever worked with has vendor and supplier agreements, or I should say they have vendor and supplier relationships, and they probably have agreements, although they might not be written down, right? They should be written down. You should have terms and agreements that govern all of your POs and your quotes and whichever side of that relationship you're on, right? Employee relationships, obviously a big area. You're going to have it as a minimum, you're going to have IP ownership issues. and you're going to have trade secret misappropriation issues you need to handle, in addition to all of the normal onboarding, offboarding types of things that you're doing. So there's probably, I think our playbook probably has 10 or 12 of these legal functions broken out, so that we can have essentially give this to a new employee who's within that level of responsibility and say, hey, you need to be aware that when these things come up, you've probably got IP issues that need to be dealt with. And I will say, let me take a short diversion here. I would, if we had time, I would love to go to OpenAI, ChatGPT, and just show you how you can do this. Now, I don't think ChatGPT gives you 100%, but if it gets you 50% and you started with 0%, you're way better off than you were with 0%. Go into ChatGPT, try it out. Say, hey, I've got an e-commerce business. I've got a SaaS business. I've got a business that's licensing, university technology software or whatever it is. And I want to know, what are some of the typical objectives with intellectual property, or what are some of the, in another area, what are some of the employment issues that I'll run into when I have a team that consists of ABCD, right? Use ChatGPT to give you a little boost. I don't want to say that it's the end all be all, because it will give you bad information at times, and knowing how to sort through that is kind of next level. But if you don't have anything, you can use, I know this because I've tried it out and I've tested it, and you can see that you can say, hey, what are some KPIs that I could implement for my type of business with my intellectual property? What are some objectives? Who are the functions and roles in a business, this type of business, that should be watching out for IP issues? What are those IP issues, right? Again, that's not the best place to go if you've got access to a competent attorney, but it's a great starting point if you're on a budget. And when you're a startup or a scaling business, a lot of times you're on a budget for some of these legal items that you can't necessarily dedicate the time and attention to. So getting back here, KPIs for IP performance, you might be looking at the number of filings that you're making. You might be looking at ranking your filings and have, quantitatively score how many filings you have in each of the kind of qualitative grades of IP filings. You might be looking just at revenue if you are a revenue generating business from your IP. A lot of people are just looking at costs and they're saying, what's our cost? And you might do that on an absolute value basis, or you might create a percentage. Your financial guys might say, well, our cost is X percent, it should be higher or lower, stuff like that. But you can kind of monitor what those KPIs are. And there's a number, you can probably do 10 or 12 of these KPIs, again, the ones that fit your business. So here's our decision-making matrix. So this is, I think, maybe one of the most important parts of our legal playbook, because it really distills down what are the types of issues that you think you're going to see in your business, and who are the people that you actually have in your business, and who has what I've called, primary decision-making authority for the business, and who has kind of supplemental or support roles for that primary decision maker. So as I mentioned before, your CEO is probably setting the strategy for the business, but your general counsel probably is going to be part of that discussion. It doesn't mean you can't have other people in your business. It might be the CFO, it might be the co-founder, it might be the technology guy. I don't know, but you should always have somebody who has actual authority, recognized authority, at least among the team, right? Who do we go to if we can't figure out what the decision is? Well, CEO, you have that authority, and we're going to hold you to it. You got to make a decision. Who's doing the budget? It's the CFO, maybe with some input from the CTO. Who's looking at the patent filings? Oh, it's probably your CTO who's directing that with some input from your general counsel. Whereas your trademark filings are probably coming from your CMO, if you have one. If you don't, it's probably coming from your CEO, unless you've delegated that function to somebody else. Maybe it's coming from your general counsel in that case, and your CEO acts as a supplemental. So really having this, if you like EOS or traction or all that stuff. Having this this is a type of accountability chart that you would do, but it's specific to this area of legal issues. So I think that's one area where it's great. It's just a great summary that you can have in the playbook, and someone can quickly digest that. And I think this is the last example I've got here, and that is training. Like, how do you implement training? This doesn't have to be elaborate, but if you've got IP issues in your business, again, use ChatGPT if you need to, or give me a call, set up a call with me, like whatever you need to do. How do you get started from wherever you're at, which might be ground zero right now, or it might be something a little more advanced. How do you go from where you're at to training the right people in your team to know about these issues and watch for them? And so you might have to, if you're new at this, you might have to kick off trainings with everybody as kind of an initial orientation. Different people will need to know different things, right? And then down the road, you might have quarterly or 6-month or annual refresher trainings or check-ins, or again, depending on your business and what you're doing, having that training schedule in place is critical to make sure that you're watching this area of law as it progresses in your business. So little sample of what that looks like. So this is, I believe, last slide here. So really, there's nothing magic here. You could always call on it, like legal headaches, how to solve legal headaches in your business. I guess call your attorney if you want to, if that's not an option for you. And I talk to a lot of people who are like, man, I'd love to use your team, but you're outside of my budget right now. Okay, well, here's a few things that you ought to be doing in the meantime until your business grows to the point where you can get legal counsel, bring somebody in full-time, part-time, whatever you need, fractional, bring somebody in to help you manage that area. And so there's no, you're going to run into legal headaches. Every business I've ever worked with, well, most of them would never call an attorney, even though it's fun to chat with them. They probably wouldn't call attorneys if they didn't have to. They call attorneys because they got issues that they don't know how to solve themselves, or they're not comfortable solving themselves, or they don't have time to solve themselves. Any of those things could totally be, not any of those things, a lot of those things could be headed off or avoided or minimized by having a little bit of structure in place with your team around the legal topics that are applicable to your team. So I'm going to leave it there. If you want a freebie, send me an email. I'll send you a template of something we've got, or set up a call with me if you want to chit chat for 30 minutes about your business and kind of roadmap out what you're looking at. Happy to help out. Really glad to be a part of the group here today. So that's it for the presentation.
Jeff, thank you so much.
You are welcome.
This is
check
awesome.
out the chat if I can. I might have to stop sharing.
That's okay. I would like to invite everybody to throw a question into the chat so we can get them in order. I'll take the first question as you guys are typing your questions for Jeff right now. But Jeff, I put in there wondering how you and the intellectual strategies team coordinate with other fractional service providers, because I love your model of being kind of that fractional in-house counsel or legal expert on teams. You mentioned being able to or needing to coordinate with other groups in the company, like the CMO if you're working on a website. So I'm wondering, we've got a fractional CMO here as well with CMO Zen with Chad. How do two groups like yours connect on those playbooks? What does that look like if Chad's got a marketing playbook on the website and you have one on the website for legal side of things? What should that interaction look like?
I think at this point in time, we haven't had any coordination with other people necessarily, because we tried to keep it pretty legal. Having a marketing and branding playbook for legal issues should not supersede anything that Chad gives to his clients, right? And so I think I'm trying not to overthink your question, but I think really my answer is this: whatever our team, our client is working with, whether they're full-time personnel, whether they're fractional personnel, like we just work with the team the same way that anybody else would, right? And so if Chad's their fractional CMO, we would love to see Chad on that matrix. We would love to see, him as part of those trainings, and coordinate with Chad, because Chad's going to be the one who tells us, well, for this business, they're really doing X, Y, Z. So if we took a generic IP playbook, for example, we could customize it into something that was exactly what that company needed, because Chad has the knowledge of what they're doing and what they're not doing. So
Hey, Jeff, awesome presentation. Thank you. Just to chime in on that, I think there's a lot of times where you throw up a website, you need a privacy policy, you need to probably at least consider what your GDPR or all the new flavors of that look like. If you have an app on that website, right, are your terms and conditions there? Like there's lots of places where I think just having a good legal process or legal playbook available to the team just streamlines it. Otherwise, what happens is people make those decisions with in the absence of that advice or expertise, and then you come back to it and it's like, oh, I guess we put something on our website we shouldn't have. We exposed ourselves to weird risk or liability, and you wouldn't have needed to do that.
yeah, no, for sure. We help a lot of clients with those terms of service, with the privacy policies, data security stuff, like whatever is happening on that website, we certainly try to plug in, and that's really all like what we are, right? We plug in the same way you plug in, and hopefully once we're all plugged in, we're just like a very seamless machine, as if we were all in the same room 80 hours a week plugging away on that business.
Awesome. Thanks for the answer. Danny, it looks like you've got a question.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Jeff, for the presentation. I'm not sure if you can just give one advice here, but like our company, we are a Delaware C Corp. We haven't fundraised yet, but we plan to in the next couple of months, and we also plan to hire programmers, developers to help us build the code base. And my question is, when it comes to IP, and which is basically say our code or our machine learning models, is there like a specific type of a document or something that would protect our IP, or is it like part of a bigger structure that we would need to implement to protect the intellectual property?
So specifically, IP really has those four different areas, right? And so if you're building an app or you're doing something that's building AI or LLM or whatever it is, like you're going to want to explore patents, and that's going to be, it's a really touchy area, because patents in the software world are difficult and expensive, and not every country acknowledges them. There's still some times where it makes sense, as long as the team isn't philosophically opposed to patents, which some are. So it really takes a conversation to understand what you're doing and how you're deploying it. Sometimes there's an opportunity to keep some of that secret. In today's world, there's a lot of things that aren't kept secret, so trade secrets are kind of off the table. So it's really more about, usually what it takes is having a conversation to really understand, not just at a like surface level, but at a little bit deeper level, what type of business are you building? What's your business model? How are you doing the code? And what type of IP assets could you build for that business? The other area to think about it, and this is super important, as you're hiring developers, and it will be different if they're in-house or if they're outsourced, is getting those agreements, either those employment arrangements or the independent contractor agreements, correct, so that you have all the assurances that you'll own that IP when it's all said and done, as opposed to somebody else owning the IP that they've built that you paid for. So I don't know if that helps. It's kind of a high level answer for the question.
Yeah, that definitely helps because like we're super new to this topic and yeah, super appreciate it.
Yeah, usually what I've seen is when I have a conversation with a company that's really getting started, they're trying to get oriented. There's usually, pick 4 or 5 of these areas that I listed out in the legal playbooks. There's usually 1, maybe 2 things from 4 or 5 different areas that a new company really needs to be watching out for. And it's going to vary if you're an e-com company, if you're a SaaS company, if you're, doing a different type of technology. It's going to vary based on what you're doing, but there's kind of an initial rough roadmap that you should keep in mind for the next, 4 to 6 months, let's say.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Jeff, I
You're
like
welcome.
the approach with the playbooks. We do those internally for our operations as well. I love it in the legal side of things. And Danny, it seems like you've got probably, like what Jeff was saying, 4 or 5 different areas from HR to IP to otherwise where you would want to run through some of those playbooks. And I like how you've broken that out, Jeff. I think that's really helpful for new companies, making it more of a bite-sized and specific actionable area. So that's awesome. We're past our 11:45 time. So if you've got questions or would like to connect with Jeff, his contact was up for a minute. Hopefully you got that down. Otherwise, Jeff, is it best to connect with you on LinkedIn or email? What's the best way to
Connect
get?
on LinkedIn. I'll throw my email here on the chat too, if anybody wants to reach out. We typically will do a free 30-minute strategy call with people. It's really just getting everybody oriented. So
Awesome. Danny, you asked about the slides. Jeff, are you able to or willing to share those with Hannah so she can get those
yeah,
out to the attendees?
Hannah's got a copy already, so yeah, for sure,
Beautiful.
share them.
So we'll share those out. Thank you. Jeff, thanks so much for being here. Brooke, thanks for being here on the IS side. It's really great to have you both. And really appreciate you taking time with us.
Thanks so much, Taylor. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. We'll see everybody next week, same time. Thanks
care.
all.
Thanks, Taylor. Thank you.
Thanks, Brooke.
Bye-bye.